off of your final purchase. That's wdeanshook.com. Please visit our sponsors. They are the heart and pumping blood of this program. So if you'd like to support us, then that's the way to do it. We don't take donations. We're not a tax exempt organization, nothing like that. We are purely sponsor supported. And let me also say we are simulcasting tonight, both on the Blog Talk Radio Network, the Spreaker Radio Network, and 6 of our broadcast affiliates. The rest of our regular broadcast affiliates will be running us, let me see, in about 2 hours, so there's a little bit delay for some of you. But the rest of you who are listening live, thank you so very much. I appreciate it very much. Now I want to start, first of all, with the fact that China, and before I read this story out of the UK Telegraph, let me say this, that China has recently, from what I understand, purchased a bio company. You know, they're buying up companies in America. They're buying up our entertainment industry. They're buying up our manufacturing industries. And people here are more than willing to sell to China. Well, when they bought up this biotech company, they have access to America's database of DNA. It seems kind of strange to me that we would be selling companies that have this kind of access to a foreign country and giving them access to our personal information like that. That's a very dangerous thing to do, especially since they are hacking our computers, our military, Pentagon, CIA computers. They're hacking our computers regularly. They are thirsty for all information they can get from America. And here are these American companies that are selling this information through these companies to China. You know, and before we start our discussion, let me say this. I talked to somebody yesterday who owns a sawmill. Now, most of you know I'm broadcasting from Oregon, and sawmills and lumber production in Oregon has always been the thriving heart of Oregon. Not so much now, since the environmental fruits and nuts have moved in and say that you can't touch any wood, or all of that baloney. But still, we export a lot of lumber. Well, I was talking to somebody yesterday who has a lumber mill, and I asked him how business was. And this guy was like a gusher. He just started overflowing with all of this information, like he didn't have anybody to tell his woes to, and it just started flowing out of him. He was telling me how hard it is to get lumber, because everybody's taking the trees that they're cutting them down and they're sending them to Taiwan and China in record numbers, and that because it's so hard for us to get our own wood here in our country, our own trees, the price of lumber in America is skyrocketing because there's no availability. Everybody's shipping it overseas. Now, it seems to me that all of these people who have all of this lumber should be able to take a couple percentage points off of their profit in order to save their own country. But greed has got such a grip on America's businesses. You know, the illegal aliens that are in this country, not just the Mexicans, but also Asians and others who are here illegally, are being taken advantage of in incredible ways. I spoke to somebody last week who is in this country from Mexico illegally, and he's working at a company, and he told me he's working 14 and 16-hour days, and that there were, in where he works, there were 5 people working with him. They fired 4 of them, and now he's there by himself, and he's about in his 15th hour of constant work. And the guy's saying, you know, I have a family, I can't work these kind of days. And they said, if you want your job, you better keep moving. Well, when our government says, well, these people are doing jobs that Americans won't do. Well, yeah, Americans are not going to do that. We're not going to work 16-hour days under the threat of losing your job, because we'd say, bye-bye. We're not going to do that. That's stupid. But they're using these illegals almost as slave labor. They're paying them lower wages. They're pushing them harder than anybody should be pushed. This whole thing with greed in this country is just absolutely ridiculous. So I'm blubbering here, so let me get to these stories. First, China, according to the UK Telegraph, China is going to overtake America by 2016 because it's on track to overtake America in the world's largest economy in 2016 as its growth accelerates, according to a report by the UK Telegraph. China's economy expanded last year at 7.8%, its slowest pace than more than a decade. I wish we could accelerate at 7.8%. He said the OECD was upbeat, predicting in a new survey of China's prospects that the country's economy would expand by 8.5% this year, by 8.9% next year. While they noted the slowdown in China's aggressive expansion is nothing less predicted that growth should average 8% in this decade at current rates of investment and reform. After allowing for price differences, it's forecasted that China would become the world's largest economy, overtaking America around 2016. Fueling the OECD's positive prediction was an optimistic outlook for investment spending in the world's second biggest economy. It pointed to substantial deficits in rail and road capacity relative to the major economies in similar stages of development, as well as to substandard housing, offering a scope of profitable spending on infrastructure. But to keep economic growth strong, this think tank urged China to make good on pledges to force state companies to complete more aggressive market and ease of movements throughout their cities and provinces. Before I go on with this, let me just tell you, if you're in China, I covered this story a couple of weeks ago. In China, if you are from a different province and you move to another area of China, you're an illegal alien. You have to stay where you live. You can't move freely. So if you move to another area, if you move from the north to the south, you become an illegal alien, and health care is not provided for you. You know, they have health care. China has health care that's basically free. If you live in that province, you're a resident of that, and you're registered in that city or town or village, wherever you live, all those things are free. If you're not registered and you're from another town or city or area in China, you don't get any of that because you're an illegal alien. Just thought I'd throw that in there for those of you that might have missed it. I always thought that was a little bizarre. However, according to the UK, they have yet to make clear whether they'll tackle the challenge of rolling back privileges, including monopolies, low-cost access to bank loans, energy for politically influential companies that are deemed national champions. Chinese leaders have promised since 2005 to open industries to private competition, with no result. What does that tell you? There's no private competition. Everything there is state-owned. They say what's needed is to make these changes effective and really open some of these sectors. So maybe this is where our country is getting the idea that communism and socialism works, because they're using it here. What they're not telling you is that the people have no freedom. The people are treated like drone ants. This is not good. So let me share this. Let me share this other one with you. This is, now I had to share that first one because it segues right into this one. Excuse me, this New World Order. Recently, Xi Jinping, who's the president of China, has visited Russia, and Vladimir Putin rolled out the red carpet for him. Now, they've always had tense relations. There's always been a sharp edge between them. But this is from The Independent. It says China's new leader, began his first overseas trip as president with a much-anticipated visit to Russia today. A symbolic trip that underlines China's desire to ensure its energy supply while showing defiance in the face of U.S. influence in Asia. Now listen to the wording as we go through this. A grand reception was held to welcome President Xi Jinping upon his arrival in Moscow. Guards riding on horseback brought out to greet the foreign leader for the first time. Kremlin guards snapped to attention as Mr. Xi and his long routine walked into the Grand Kremlin Palace, where they met members of official delegations at the ornate St. George Hall. China and Russia are the main and most important strategic partners. This is what Jinping said. He said it was eagerly anticipated this meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In many ways we speak a common language, he said. The grand welcome was a clear indication of the importance placed on the visit to Moscow. Russia is one of the world's biggest energy producers. China is the top energy consumer. These realities tend to outweigh the traditional tense relations between the two neighboring giants, who were bitter rivals during the Soviet-era dispute, even though they have ideological links. Russia and China have rising concerns, and they're anxious that it might someday threaten its dominance on the eastern borders. But a bigger concern for the Kremlin, one that it shares with China, is blunting U.S. influence in the region. At the start of talks, Mr. Putin described the ties between the two countries as an extremely important factor of global politics. Ahead of the Chinese president's arrival, we're working together to help shape a more just new world order. A more just new world order to ensure peace and security, defend the basic principles of international law. He said, the Chinese president said the relations between the two countries are the best ever. So when we talked about this coming New World Order, if you remember all of the many times that I've covered this, I've always said that during this process, we never really know how all of these things are going to come about. That's why I've never predicted that somebody's going to do this, that, or the other thing. Because every time I do that, because this is end-time prophecy and this is God's work, every time I've tried to do that, God always chooses something different. And I really didn't expect exactly for things to come about this way for the New World Order. Let me read this part again. This is from the Chinese president. We're working together to help shape a new, more just New World Order to ensure peace and security, to defend basic principles of international law. Now, these are two very huge countries, with Russia being a top producer in fossil fuels, with the Chinese being the world's largest economy by 2016. And what does the Bible say about the end times? It says that in this final battle of Armageddon, the first attack is going to come from the north. He will have bad tidings from the east. Who's east of that? That's China. Now, in the past, people have said there was no China when they said that. Wait, they weren't talking about the times then. They were talking about the times now. Very different. You have to keep this in perspective. Now, if you're one of those people that just says all the time, well, that can't be it because China didn't exist when they said that. Well, you know, say what you want. It doesn't really matter to me, because the fact is they weren't talking about that time. They were talking about these end times. So let's go on with this story. It said in recent years, the need to counterbalance the growing might of the U.S. has led to these two superpowers setting aside some differences. Strong trade links have also smoothed some of the wrinkles in the interim. Bilateral trade soaring to a record $58 billion last year. Beijing and Moscow have taken similar stance in some of the biggest geopolitical issues of recent years. North Korea, Iran,